So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology, and welcome to the Samsung Galaxy A56 unboxing and first impressions. Now you can see right here it does say A56 on the left side. At the bottom, nothing really there, just kind of a picture of the phone on the front. It's not engraved, it's just a picture on there. On the back, pretty much nothing. Specs aren't really listed on phones these days. Anyway, now I did pre-unbox this just to kind of like speed up this process, as we want to get into the phone really. But you can see inside here you are going to have, you know, a couple of things in here. So you will have a SIM card tool on the back because this does support an actual SIM. We go ahead and pull this out. You have some warranty guides, how to take off the SIM, and just a USB-C to USB-C cable. That's about it. So no charger included in the box here with the Galaxy A56. Just that. Now I did go with the olive color here, so I think it's one of the nicer colors of these options. There are a few other colors you can get for this phone, including a purple looking color. You can also get a pink color. You can get graphite, and you can get a light gray color, but I wanted to go with the more closer to a green color, what they're calling olive here. And you can see if we go ahead and peel this off, we are presented with a 6.7-inch display on here, which is up from some previous Galaxy A series phones. Definitely a big display here. And if you take a look, this phone is extremely thin compared to the previous A generations on here. But as we get into the phone, I'm going to go ahead and talk about my first impressions here on the actual build and design. So the actual build and design is basically a glass back. So if we look at the back here, and this phone, honestly, I thought it looked kind of cheap on pictures, but when holding it and now seeing it in hand, it's actually quite nice. So we have a glass back here. I also thought in the pictures that this was like a plasticky look, but actually in person, that's like a metal ring around the camera. So it's actually quite nice there. The glass back does remind me of some yesteryear flagships, as most flagships are going to a matte frosted kind of back, where this is just like a pure glass. And then on the sides, we do have something reminiscent of the Galaxy A55 with its brushed aluminum look. However, they are going with a thinner build here, which is extremely noticeable in a much lighter phone here. So it feels way lighter than previous edition. You could see we do have ourselves USB-C, SIM card, and also audio over there. On the left, pretty much nothing, just some antenna lines. And overall, I would say for the price of this phone, this thing feels so much nicer than something like the iPhone 16e, for example. So really, really good option here. Also feels more premium than like a Nothing Phone 3a, and definitely feels more premium than the prior Pixel 8a that I had. So the actual build of this phone is actually quite nice. Now this phone also feels quite wide, but it also has pretty nice thinness and lightness. So this is going to be an excellent media consumption phone. Over here, whether you're watching videos, consuming news, or anything like that, this device is definitely going to feel like a nicer option over here. So definitely digging that about this device. And if you're wondering why that looked a bit choppy, that's because I just turned this phone on. One of the things I will say about the A series, and I have noticed this over the years, is that when you first turn them on, they take a little bit to warm up. It reminds me of like a car that just started up, a gas car or whatever. This thing takes a second to warm up, but after everything gets warmed up, then it starts to run smoother. You've seen right there that now it's actually running along smoother than it did earlier. You could see now that things are turning on. So when you first boot it up, it does take a second, but on the whole, I have to say this display is quite nice. I will say one thing though, it is older Samsung technology. This is Super AMOLED. They had this since like 2010. Also, the bezels are kind of noticeable here. One thing I don't like though is that I feel like the bottom bezel, well, some people would call a chin back in the day, it's not really a chin anymore. It's not huge, but this bottom bezel looks bigger than the top bezel. I'm not a fan of that look. Also, you can see that the side bezels are relatively thin. I just wish they were a little more uniform. That bottom bezel just looks bigger. So if they want to improve this phone, they could actually reduce that on the future versions. I don't think that's going to cost them too much to do that, especially if they're still putting Super AMOLED on here. So Super AMOLED is a more vivid, saturated look than the dynamic AMOLED displays they have, but it's also not quite as accurate or natural looking. So if you want a more natural look, you can turn on natural. But if you want a more saturated phone, this one is definitely going to be that. This is even more saturated looking than some of the Galaxy S phones. So if you like that vibrant, saturated look, the older Super AMOLEDs like this have that going for it. I will say though that for the price, it's a great value because this looks way better than an LCD. It's a huge display, and you would think it's a flagship level panel. It definitely almost looks that way. Also, it gets pretty bright. This actually gets brighter than the previous version at 1200 nits. In addition, this display could have been used on a flagship phone years ago. So this definitely is good value for the money. You're getting arguably one of the nicer displays on one of these types of phones in this segment. So I definitely do really like it. The punch hole is bigger than what you'll find on some of the larger Samsung phones like the S Ultra and stuff like that. This is a bigger punch hole. But on the whole, and it is 1080p, so you're not getting your full 2K resolution or anything like that. This is not a flagship, so don't expect that. But at least you are getting a high refresh rate, so that's good. You get the adaptive refresh up to 120 hertz, and that is super noticeable because this phone feels way smoother than the 60 hertz 16E. So definitely, I quite like the overall experience here on the display. It's one of the biggest standout features of the A series, getting a great display at a low price. First impressions on software, we are looking at One UI 7, which is a big deal for this phone because One UI 7 brings kind of like a lighter feel to me, also gives us the same theming options we're used to. In addition, it makes animations in the whole system just run nicer. So One UI 7 is kind of a big deal for the A line. We don't have it yet. They're just about to go in beta on the prior version, but the One UI 7 is a big deal for this phone. One of the cons though about, I would say, even purchasing this phone is that if you don't buy it early on when it first comes out, the major OS updates, while they are updated and they are supported, the A50 line is definitely one of the more supported of the budget phones. It tends to take a while to come to this device. So don't expect the fastest updates. That's one of the cons of this phone. But first impressions on software, it's running really smooth on this Galaxy A56, and it's making for a better experience than I had on prior A lines. It's feeling really nice. Like I almost can't see the difference between this and a flagship, and that is a really good experience for what I paid for this, under $400. So this is pretty impressive to me to have this polish of software. And yes, we don't get the latest AI features. We get a couple of advanced features, including some intelligent things like Object Eraser, AI Select, and of course you can do Google's integrated AI like Google Search. You could download things like ChatGPT. You can use the Gemini application. So you can use AI, but this phone is not AI specific. That's one of the cons still of going to an A line versus an S line. The S line is going to have the built-in AI stuff, but you also don't have anything like an S Pen. This is a entry level, but you do get yourself a nice curved edge, so it is pretty comfortable to hold. But you got a nice set of advanced features, like you have some lab modes, you have side button features you could set up, you can do multi-window, motions and gestures are all here. You got quite a few things to play around with. Of course, this does work with the Samsung ecosystem as well, so you can have this pair up to your tablet, your watch, your Galaxy Buds. So nice entryway to get into the ecosystem. I do quite like it. Also, if you go over here and hold down, you do have built-in access to the Galaxy theme store, so really theming out this to your liking. I also like the way this phone sits in the hand. It's got more curved edges. It's more like a Galaxy S25 Plus, but like a budget version. And one thing I will say though is that this aluminum frame, it's not super smooth at the corners like over here on the top. It is nice on the sides here, but there is a slight dip. So if you do hold your phone a little tight, you will feel it kind of like digging into the palm. So what I mean is it's not as smooth as one of the older Galaxy A54s. These phones were just like a little smoother feeling for some reason. So definitely that was noticeable, but it's not a big issue. It really isn't. You could just put a very thin case on here and you won't even feel that anymore. But some people want to rock this without a case, but with that pure glass back, I don't know if I would do that honestly on this phone. All right, when it comes to performance, I did go with the 128 gig, 8 gig of RAM version. You can go with a 12 gig, but you're going to have to pay a little bit more for that, like $50 more or whatever. For me, I already knew that this was going to be fine with 8 gigs because most Samsung phones need a minimum of 8 gigs to run well. And so this, because it's not my main phone, I went with the 8 GB of RAM version to test this out. And honestly, I'm quite happy. It's not really giving me any major stutters, major issues besides the typical when you first turn it on stuff. And I've tried other mid-rangers and budget phones with 12 gigs of RAM, and it hasn't really made a big difference like in speed. Usually it's a CPU. And this one does come with a Exynos 1580. So that's up over the 1480 of last year, but not really flagship or even like a budget beast kind of chip. It's just a decent one. What's good about it though is that it's a Samsung CPU. So you're probably going to get really good battery life because it's their CPU and their phone. So definitely I will say that that's a good thing for that. But this is no like OnePlus 13R or iPhone 16e type chip in here. But we will still do a speed test just to see what kind of performance we are actually getting with this. But so far, I got to say, once it warms up, it's been running very good and much nicer than some of the other A lines I used to review. Those were kind of choppy, even though they were still good value. They were kind of choppy when it comes to the performance. So first impressions on the battery, I haven't had enough time with it yet, but I already know this thing's going to be a beast. 5,000 milliamp hours. This is a 1080p display and a low power CPU, like not a super high power CPU. So you don't really need to worry much about battery. This actually has a larger battery than the iPhone 16 Pro Max. So this thing is gonna just sip it. So if you're, and One UI 7 is pretty efficient as well. So if you're looking for a really good overall battery life, this is one of those Samsung phones that's gonna crush it. The higher end ones, I think because their CPUs are more powerful, sometimes they can drain a little bit more. You're also probably using it a little bit heavier, but really good battery size for this thinness. It's really quite impressive. 7.4 millimeters thick only. You do see the camera bump come a bit off the surface, but pretty thin, pretty large battery. This is a pretty impressive package for the price of this phone. It quite is. So always on my first impressions, I take a look at the wallpaper suite. So if we go in here, you will see change wallpapers, and as usual, Samsung not giving me a lot of wallpapers, giving me this one right here, this lock screen one right here. I'll put that on. And then if we go over here, back to change wallpapers, you'll see we have that one, and then these come on basically all Samsung phones. Down here, we do have graphical wallpapers, and then down here, just the colors. And because this doesn't have the Galaxy AI, you don't get them Galaxy AI wallpapers. You can go over here to wallpaper services, and you can get some from the Galaxy themes, like the one I had on my previous speed test on the Ultra. So there's definitely more you can grab. You can go grab them on different apps and stuff, but their included suite is not that great. So not a fan of that. I know it's a minor thing. I just want to see more wallpapers. A lot of phones give us a lot of nice wallpaper packs built right in from the start. So let's take a look at the camera over here. So we are looking at a 1X. We do have an ultra wide on board, which is a great addition. 2x zoom, and you can go all the way up to 10x zoom. Now this camera is a 50 megapixel on the rear, and we have a 12 megapixel on the front, which I believe is down from previous versions. But overall, you're going to get yourself a pretty nice mid-ranger camera here. And what's pretty impressive is that this phone not only gives you really decent photo quality, you also have some really great features included within this camera suite. So if we go over here, you can see One UI 7 brings the camera controls down, which is actually really good for this phone because this phone is already big. So having them lower makes it easier to just kind of like get to them. Now over here, we go to more. What I liked about this is that you have pro video even on this phone. And while you're still limited by not having the best set of lenses compared to some higher end phones, at least you can get started with your pro video and pro photography aspirations over here. So I like that it includes these modes, including food mode, panoramic, even a dedicated macro mode, which is something you tend to have to buy higher end phones back in the day for. So it's kind of nice to have these features on such a lower price tag phone. So Samsung really is throwing it in here. Dual recording, which is a nice touch, single take. And then on top of that, you have a fun mode. You have portrait mode. You got what you need. You really do. One thing you are sacrificing though is you don't get UHD 60, not on the front, not on the rear. You also don't even get UHD 60 on either camera. So that is one of the cons. And of course, your overall results will be good on this phone, but they're not going to be the next level good. So I would say it's a slight sacrifice in the camera, especially if you're want to use like have higher quality. But if you're okay with just, you know, this level of phone quality camera, I think you're going to be pretty happy. It does a good job overall. It's just not, once you start zooming in, it's not going to be anywhere near a top tier phone. Just keep that in mind. So first impressions so far, I'm liking the build. It's quite nice. I also think the performance is pretty good actually for what it is. It's not super fast, but it does a good job. I like One UI 7 on here. I don't like the bezels. I'm not a fan of the button placement. I think it's way too high. They need to bring this down. In addition, I don't really like the black on the camera. I wish it was like the body color, but you know, it's still a metal, so it's kind of nice. In terms of the material itself, punch hole could get smaller. There's some improvements that could be made here, but the battery life's good, the display is good, and the experience is good, like the software experience. So that's like where they really shine, the actual usable things you need. All right, so let's compare it to last year's Galaxy A56. Now, last year's Galaxy A56, much thicker. Nice phone, almost equally as nice. As actually, I do think the rear cameras look nicer on last year's. They kind of match the body and the ring. It's just nicer looking to me. But overall, at the bottom, you'll see we have basically the same setup. Just a thinner, lighter phone. Button placements are in basically the same locations. I'm just not a fan of the newer camera. It just doesn't look as good to me. But it's heavier, thicker. It's just bulkier. I don't like the A55 anymore holding that versus this one. This one feels much more manageable in the hand. So ergonomically, holding the phone, they definitely improved that. Versus a couple years ago, I'm sorry, but the Galaxy A54 just feels downright cheap compared to this phone. I don't know what it is. It just doesn't feel as nice. It feels heavier. The sides feel cheaper. It just feels like a cheap phone by comparison to the newer one. The newer one feels like they went to the next level in design and performance. So they found a way to use not as high end of a S line, but still making it feel much more premium than their prior A line. So they're doing a good job in making the sacrifices while also making it feel like an upgrade in this segment. So definitely that one felt much cheaper. But both of these were still solid options, but this is just much nicer. Let's take a look here at the Pixel 8a. So bezels, ridiculous on the Pixel 8a, but I like the camera bar design. We'll be seeing the Pixel 9a soon on the channel where they got rid of the camera bar. I like the shape of the Pixel. It feels nice in the hand. The edges feel nice, a lot smaller, but definitely it's kind of weighty because the battery in this smaller size, cheaper back. So these are both nice, but I do think the A still feels nicer than the Pixel A, and when it comes to like a premium feel. How about the Nothing Phone 3A? Now I am going to compare a lot of these phones in some comparison videos and speed tests. The Nothing Phone feels like this is on the same level in terms of the actual, let's go ahead and open this up. Nothing Phone feels like it's on the same level in terms of the actual display size of phone. It actually feels bigger and thicker than the Galaxy A line, but I actually think I prefer the way the Nothing's edges feel. They feel smoother in the hand. I do like the software on the Nothing. I think it's pretty minimal. I do like it quite a bit. The cameras look like the same thing, just one's shaped a different way. Very unique looking on the Nothing Phone 3A, but I would say the Samsung still feels thinner, lighter, and more of a daily comfortable big phone to use than the Nothing Phone 3A. But 3A definitely probably the closest, nicest competitor here so far that I've looked at. And then this one, even though this phone is kind of like targeting a similar buyer trying to save some money, has a higher end CPU, so it costs more, but feels much older. The iPhone 16e, but it's minimal, clean, one single camera, but definitely, I don't know, the Galaxy A56 just blows this thing away when it comes to display smoothness, size, battery size. We do have the C1 in here, so it does give us pretty longevity. But on the whole, the 16e just can't compete with these mid-rangers. I just dropped it. It just can't compete with these mid-range phones because they put a single camera, that old feel, and the Galaxy A56 is showing why it's still one of the top players in this segment. They're giving you mostly all these like premium kind of feel and touches, and most of the things that make a Samsung phone great while sacrificing just a few and giving you a much lower price. So that's it for me. I'll use this phone a little bit more. We'll do our comparisons, our speed tests, and we'll also take a look maybe at a full review of this after I've had it for a little while, depending on how popular it becomes here. Like if you guys really want to see a full review, let me know down below. But on first impressions, first glance, you could see everything hands-on. This phone is solid. It's a solid entry. It really is. And I was actually very excited to get this one in-house because this one, for the money, it's just really good. So I quite like it. I'll catch you all in the next episode. Let me know your thoughts on the Galaxy A56. I know the A36 just came out. That's actually a lesser version of this phone. We'll go ahead and consider looking at that if it's really a big interest. But stay tuned. We got some speed tests coming with this one, some full reviews. But stay tuned. We got some comparisons coming with this one. And let me know if you picked up an A56. What color? Do you like the phone? Have you been enjoying it? Any issues with it? Share with the community down below in the comments section. I'll catch you on the next episode. Nick here. Be sure to be well, and peace.